All right, welcome back. This is Reese with Coffee with Coaches. We're sitting here with Loretta and Marek. We're coming at you with Ornery Mule Racing, where we strive to build community through kindness and trail running. So today we have a pretty cool podcast. Loretta and I are going to interview Marek Butkewickz. I think I said that right. Right, Marek?
That was an attempt.
Okay, good attempt. That's close enough, I guess. So we're going to interview Marek. Marek's been running a few ultra marathons. I've lined up with him in a couple races. And Marek, you're how old?
I'm 14. I turned 15 in early September.
Okay, rad. So you're right in high school. And I think this is a really interesting storyline for a lot of us ultra runners because as you've probably seen, Marek, we're like late 20s, like at the youngest, up to 30s and 40s. So it's definitely like an older demographic. So I think it's really interesting to get your perspective of, how you train for races, how you race, your shorter races, your track and cross country, I believe you have coming up, right?
Yeah.
And how you interweave that with all of your ultra running. And you did just run a race called Ode to Laz. It's a backyard style ultra marathon. So that's kind of where our topic is going to end up today. But I guess to start, Marek, I kind of want to hear like what got you into running. Like what was the driving factor for you?
So it was my dad. We live like our backyard is like a land preserve, so we have trails back there, and he just did it. He ran cross country in high school, but in like his mid 30s, he just started training for a 5K. I'm like, hey, I can do that. So I did a couch to 5K plan and just kind of running around with him. And then I always just wanted more. So I'm like, all right, let's do a 10K. So knocked that out. And then I ran a half marathon, then a marathon. And I'm like, wow, this is fun. So I just kind of kept it going, started 3 or 4 years ago, just with my dad out in the trails in our backyard, just running around.
So in 3 to 4 years, you built up from a 5K all the way to a marathon. When was at what age was your first race?
My first actual race, I want to say I was 11 or 12, and it was a half marathon, I think. I ran the Borges half marathon, but it was during COVID, so it was virtual. So we just ran it in trails out in our backyard. We were just looping. My dad ran the full marathon. I ran the half marathon. So we were kind of knocking stuff out together.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's really only a couple years ago. And now, when was your first ultra race?
So it was, I think, 2 years ago. It was the Woodside Ramble 50K in San Fran, California. We, up to this point, I hadn't lined up for a marathon, like actual race or anything because of COVID, all my races were virtual. So I ran my first marathon. My first marathon was a trail marathon in Grand Rapids. I think it was that area. And then about 6 or so months after that, I was 13. I ran my first 50K in San Fran. So that was sweet. That was like 5,800 feet of elevation gain at elevation. My dad and I both ran that. I think my time was like 6:34. So, I mean, we were both totally unprepared for that. I mean, I was running with like one bottle with some Noon tablets and some goos and trying to make it through the mountains.
Wow, that's amazing. So that was just about like a year ago then was your first ultra race?
I want to say two. It was about a year and a half, 2 ago.
Okay. Amazing. So what is driving you to just keep pushing up the distance? Because I mean, running 5 and 10Ks and then running 50Ks in the mountains plus are like two different sports almost.
Yeah, for sure. I honestly think it's just me just wanting more. Like there's just something inside that is just fighting for a challenge and something bigger every time. And just seeing failure, seeing races go horribly, seeing races go great, and just wanting to challenge myself and put it all out there.
So are you reminding yourself that when things get tough? Because I want to say, like you lined up, was it Black Canyons this year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Black Canyon. Okay, so you were at Black Canyon, you were at Kettle, and you were going for the 100 mile at Kettle, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you just did this Eau de Laz race. So when things get tough, because I think Black Canyon was a tough day, Kettle was a little bit of a tough day. Is that
Yeah.
what you're reminding yourself, or what's going on in your head when you're out on these long runs and things aren't going quite your way? Like, how do you have the mental strength at 14 years old with such little experience, really, to keep
Yeah.
pushing in these long races?
I kind of just tell myself like, you came out here to do this, let's get it done, like you paid to hurt now. Let's go hurt,
Mm-hmm.
But I just repeat that over and over in my head, and I just try to remind myself why I came out here, like I want to do this for some reason, and sometimes like I don't remember that when I'm like in the pain cave, I'm like, man, why am I doing this? I just gotta keep going, just think about my finish, how good it's gonna feel to sit down in the car and take like a 5-hour nap. Just think about getting to the finish line. But sometimes, that doesn't work. Like at Black Canyon, I was sick with COVID, but I still ran it. So I was just crawling to the finish line. But I ended up finishing that one. But, we saw the opposite at Kettle. I blew my hip out and then just wasn't having a good day and couldn't keep going mentally.
What do your friends think about the distances that you're doing?
They think I'm pretty crazy. I know I kind of gave one of my friends the ultra bug. He's a cross country and track friend of mine. I've known him for about a year, coming up on a year. He saw me running this stuff, and I asked him to pace me for the last 40 at Kettle because I kind of showed him the benefits of like long, slow runs and stuff like that. So he knocked out like 20 or so miles before this. It was his longest run. I'm like, yeah, man, it'll be like a power hike basically. So we were kind of cruising until mile 75 at Kettle, and he's like, I'm going to finish this by myself. If you're going to drop, I'm going to drop my pacer bib and just keep going. So I'm like, okay, that works. So he ran his first 50K there, and then he actually ran his first 50 miler last weekend at Laz with me.
Oh, wow. So you're
inspiring
him too. That's cool.
Yeah, he's crazy. He's really strong mentally, but I think he's got a little bit more to go strength-wise in the legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to offend you when I say like relatively little experience in the sport. Like two years is a good amount of time to collect some experience and whatnot. But I just think it's amazing that there's people that have been in the sport for 10 plus years and they're still working on their 50K or their 50 mile or their 100K or 100-mile finish. So relatively compared to people who have been here for like a long time, I think your progression over the past couple of years, going from like the 5K, 10K, all of a sudden now going up through like a backyard race and completing 100 miles there is just phenomenal. So yeah, I think your trajectory is just kind of skyrocketed. And then too, like how you're kind of wrangling your friends too to get them introduced to this like trail culture, because I think it's a culture that that is super accepting of like a bunch of different people regardless of their background or their age or whatnot. So I thought it was super cool to get your experience on the podcast here, because you're a part of the community, your friends are a part of the community, and like we welcome everyone if they just want to go and see how long they can go and see where their mind can go when they experience an ultra marathon and be out in the woods or be on the trails for such a long time. Let's go a little bit more into your background too, because I think it's cool that like you are building up this robustness in your legs doing these ultra marathons. But I mean, you have some pretty impressive track times too. And Loretta, you were awesome at picking this stuff up. But let's see here.
We
Okay,
looked up
so-
on athletic.net to get the data.
Yeah. So we did a little background investigation on you. So you have a 1,600 meters, which is like just shy of a mile. It's basically a track mile, 4 laps
Yeah.
around the track. 4:32:01.
Yeah.
So that's 4 minutes, 32 seconds. That is crazy fast. At 3,200 meters, which is around 2 miles, in 9:41, which is just crazy fast again. How do you, as like a high school track and budding cross country athlete, take that speed and then try to wrap it up into these ultra distances? Because I mean, when you start an ultra marathon, you're going nowhere near, you know, your 1 mile capability, right? So how does that factor into like your overall perceived effort?
Honestly, I think they both benefit each other, but it's not physical, it's more mental. Like, you're hurting a lot for a short amount of time in like a 2 mile. And you're like, okay, if I've run 100 miles, hurting worse than this, I can keep going for 5 or 6 minutes. And then when you're hurting in 100 mile, you're like, okay, I'm running the 12-minute mile and hurting, and I ran like a 450 mile for 2 miles. I can do this. This isn't bad. And just using both of those in a mental spot just to like keep going. I mean, you're hurting a lot in both of them, and that benefits you a lot.
So
you're absolutely right about
Yeah.
like the different types of hurt for sure.
Right.
I guess my next question, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Loretta. Actually, you can go first. I'm sorry.
Okay, I can wait. So my question is, I've coached and worked with a lot of middle school, high school athletes, and a lot of athletes in middle school and high school, their only pace is race pace. So, they're always training at that fast pace. So was it hard for you to shift gears to really slow down? Because, that's a huge difference, right? It makes you feel really a lot slower. And, how were you able to do that? And was it your dad that just kind of helped you with that? Or how did you get to that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad taught me about all the benefits of, going slow, running like that aerobic base pace, building that up on the super long, slow miles. And I think that's like, once you get out on the trails, it's a lot easier to go slower.
Right.
Like, you'd think, yeah, no, you're running like 6 miles, you're going to go fast. Like, not on the trails. Like, you're running like 8:30 is like your fastest pace when you're running out there on easy runs. So it's definitely a little mentally tough to slow down in a race for like the first 20 miles. But I mean, it's so necessary in such a long race. Like, you have to do it, but it's definitely a little mentally tough.
Right. Absolutely.
In speaking of like mental toughness, how do you rationalize? So we have these different like feelings of pain. We have the track pain of like fast and hard and quick, and then we have the ultra pain of like dragging it out for a long time. So when you rationalize that pain in your head, how do you see it? Do you see it as like negative? Do you see it as necessary? Are you waiting for it? Are you trying not to experience it? Like, how do you grip that type of pain that everybody experiences?
That's really interesting. Yeah, I kind of just let myself kind of realize that it's gonna happen at some point. Like, it could happen at 10 miles into a race, like depending on how my body is and how my training went. It could start later, it could start earlier, but it's gonna come at some point, unless you have like a miracle performance, like you're gonna start hurting. So I really just try to embrace the pain as much as possible.
And so like pain, like not talking like, oh, you twist your ankle and, like it's, so like difference in like, training pain and running a long time pain versus, like an injury type of pain. I'd imagine like is kind of something that you're still playing around with,
Yeah. Yeah. Like mental fatigue and mental pains, like going through rough spots mentally, like that hurts, you know, that's still a type of pain that you're going to experience.
And I guess, like, are you like this just came into my mind. I'm asking you these questions as I'm thinking about them because I'm genuinely curious. But are you afraid of failure when you line up to these big races? Like, what is your mentality before, like the night before? Are you afraid that, like, man, you know, I'm kind of young, like I don't have a ton of experience, I'm gonna be the youngest one out there by far? Are you scared, like I can't do this, or are you afraid to let people down?
Not really. I'm kind of just like, I went through the same training as everybody else that's lining up. I mean, I've proved myself in the past that I can line up against everybody and still perform better, if not the same. And in like recent races, I really haven't had many pre-race nerves. I just kind of go in and I'm like, yeah, I trained for this. It's time to get it done. But the only time I was really scared and like, I don't know if I can do this, was Black Canyon. You know, going in, I was super sick the week before. We didn't know I had COVID then, but now we're kind of looking back and we're like, yeah, that was COVID. So that one, I was kind of stressing that I was going to drop out, but fortunately I didn't. Crawled to the finish line in just under 16 hours. But I mean, I kind of just show up to a race knowing I trained for it and go and get it done, unless something happens and I drop out.
How does that compare to stepping up to running a 1600 meter or an 800 meter on the track?
Oh man. I mean, in an ultra, there's definitely a lot more opportunities to quit. So you get a lot of mental toughness from that, and that translates over to the track. You know, you can line up and be like, okay, this is 4.5 minutes of running I'm about to do. That's easy stuff. But, you know, you're going to start hurting a lot more than like running 100 miles or so. Like that's going to hurt a lot. You're going to be dead after. So it's definitely way different. I get a lot of nerves on the track and in cross country. So it's drastically different, but it's also totally the same, you know.
I would have to agree. I feel like I would much rather step up to the line of a 100-mile race than of a 5K. Like, you just have a minimal amount of time to do really well in a 5K. In 100, you've got some time for error.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you have like a really good grip on like the psychology of like, how do I experience these nerves? How do I line up to the start line feeling confident in like your preparation and everything? So I guess like now's a good time to transition to this Ode to Laz race that you just completed. And for anybody that's not familiar with the Backyard Ultra, it's a 4.16 mile loop that you do on the hour, every hour. There's no starting early. And if you don't make it in the hour, the 4.16 in the hour, you essentially DNF. So really in these races, there's only one technical finisher. So it's set up like that. So that way after 24 hours and 24 laps, you end up hitting 100 miles. So
yeah, and it was designed by Lazarus Lake. Have you ever gotten to meet Laz? I know he was at Ode a year or so ago.
I haven't. I was hoping he'd show up this year, but he didn't.
Yeah, super cool guy. I got to be friends with him. He came on the podcast, and we've kind of messaged back and forth. And I knew he was coming to Michigan, but he is a mastermind of these races and coming up with things to make it super, super challenging. And that's why that race was called Ode to Laz, was, you know, based on his backyard ultras.
Yep, he's the infamous figure behind the Barkley Marathon. So for anybody familiar with that, you can go onto YouTube and plug that in, you know, and check out the Barkley Marathon demands. There's even a couple Netflix documentaries for anybody that's looking for some good, you know, veg out running material. It's a fantastic movie. I think it's called Barkley Marathon, like the race that eats its young or something like that. Yeah. It's fantastic. But so now let's say, you know, you come out of Kettle and you DNF'd about what, like 100K in, maybe a little bit more than that?
Mile 75, the 75 aid station. So I was on the second out and back.
Oh man, you were so close.
That hurts.
So you come out of DNFing at 75 miles of kettle. So I'd imagine there's a lot of emotion of like, you came such a long way. Like it's a major accomplishment to even make it that far in the first place. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But at the same time, that feeling of like, but I didn't get all the way. So now you're taking that emotion, knowing that you have another race about like a month and a half later, this Ode to Laz. So let's pick up maybe right after kettle. Like, what did your training look like? Where was your mind as far as like your previous kettle performance? You just kind of roll us through up to the start of the Ode to Laz race.
Yeah, so I came out of kettle with that hip thing, and I talked with you after that on a video call, and we realized like, yeah, it was a little bit of strength stuff that I needed. So in that month and a half, I integrated like 2 or 3 days worth of strength training, like a week, and kept up ultra mileage. I was using David Roach's training plan like I always do. I was kind of jumping through a few of the weeks. I hit a 70-mile peak week about 3 weeks out, and then I went down in a taper from there, and then jumped in week of the race and was just kind of like, yeah, it was my New Year's resolution to run 100 miles, and this is my last chance this year, so time to get it done. And just went into the race, wanting that and knowing like I had to get it done. Like it was now or never. So I was just went into that with that mindset, and I think that really dragged me through the entire way.
So did you like what was your where was your mind when you started building up for that for the Ode to Laz race? Was your mind like, oh man, like I had this failure? Did that let you did you let it shake your confidence at all building into this next block, or was it like fuel for getting back after it?
It was a lot of fuel. Like I was like, yeah, no, I knew I could have gotten this done, and I'm at a much better spot than I was going into kettle. I ran kettle off of track mileage and track workouts, so I wasn't doing like ultra stuff to prep for that. So I was like, yeah, I did all my ultra stuff going into this, so I mean, I have to get it done. Like there's no excuses.
So if you ran kettle off of track workout, what was your longest long run going into kettle?
I want to say like 20 miles.
Okay. And that was something you did outside of track, or was that incorporated into your track workout?
That was outside of track. Track stuff is so short. It's
right.
awful. Like the training miles are like 40 miles a week. I was during that. But yeah, and during track too, like the meets, our long meets on Saturdays were like up to 8 hours long. So that took out like a long run day I could have used, which really affected me. And like you need a rest day after you run 3 events. I ran the 4x8 mile and 2 miles, so like I was cooked the day after.
Right. So how did you blend in your long runs then during track season?
Well, I kind of did them. I think my average long run was like 14 miles. I did them when I could, but most weeks like track was just too much. We have 2 meets a week, so I was running fast for like 7 miles a week.
Right.
7 miles of racing a week, like that's tough on the legs. So
right, definitely.
It was super hard to incorporate long runs into that.
Yeah, definitely. High school track is definitely takes a beating on the body because you're running 2 to 3 meets a week, and some athletes are running 3 or 4 events a meet. So it's hard to do other training around there because you're almost just recovering between the meets to get to the next meet. So
yeah.
So now you have all this speed work that you did for the track season, for your track running before kettle, and not too many like long runs. and then kettle comes in, you do your recovery, you get back after it, and you pretty much, so like building up to 75 miles a week, like that's definitely a lot different than what your body was used to experiencing beforehand. Were you just doing like that kind of like long, easy intensity type of running, or were you adding a couple spicier workouts in there?
Are you talking about building up to kettle or building up to LAS, like after?
Building up to LAS, sorry.
Oh yeah. No, the base mileage was huge. Like I'm a big preacher of base mileage. Like I really like that. But I also really need to be able to go fast at least like once a week and be able to crank out like a workout, like a hard workout at like fast pace. So I was doing like hill sprints and stuff during, and then I had like one workout on Wednesdays that I would do. It was integrated into David Roach's training plan. So I would crank that out a week, and that pretty much satisfied like my spike for speed that I needed.
Nice. And the LAS course has a bit of a, I've been to it before, but it has a bit of a hill climb and a little bit of stairs, isn't it? Coming up into to the side. Yeah. So did you feel like the hill work that you did had you ready for that? You're in the strength training. Did that have your legs ready for the climb?
Yeah. I mean, I really wasn't feeling much fatigue going into like 40, 45 miles. Like I was feeling super fresh. So it was definitely, the hills were definitely taken care of with the strength stuff and the hill stuff.
How did you strategize? You know, there's different strategies in the backyard ultras. Some people are going, you know, a little bit faster so they have more rest. Some people go slower, have less rest time. You know, how did you do that? And how did you hold back at the beginning?
Loretta. That is a good question. I love this kind of talk. Let's talk strategy.
Yeah. So I felt like I was kind of in the middle, you know. My plan was to go out and walk the uphills, run flat and downs. So I did that. I came in 47, 48 minutes like every single lap. So I had a solid amount of rest period between laps, but my strategy was, you know, figure out what I needed prior to coming back for the lap and see what time I needed for that, and then run a fast lap or run a slower lap if I needed more time, you know.
And how did you feel? Because taking those breaks can be rough, you know, especially later in miles and starting to get tight. How did your body handle that?
Honestly, like I was doing fine until like the nighttime hit. Like when it hit the night, like that's when things kind of started to go a little bit mentally. And then it was just all about just getting up. And once I started running, I would feel better. So hitting the line, you know, I was all like lactic acid that built up, you know, I was kind of cramped. So it was all about just lining up and then going out and shaking the legs out, really.
And the course changes, right? At nighttime, it changes to the more of a paved path rather than on the trail.
Yeah, so it was completely road for 50 miles. So you're on 50 miles of trail, then 50 miles of road. And the road was absolutely brutal. Like it was just beating up my feet. So I was kind of just trying to get through the night because for the most part, I was alone. You know, I ran with a few people on a few laps, but for about 3/4 of it, you know, I was alone. It was just me and my headlight at like 2 a.m, which was kind of scary at some points. I know one time I was listening to Metallica. I was listening to Enter Sandman, and I'm like, this is kind of scary. So I ran a faster lap that lap.
Oh, that's great. So was your goal to go for as long as you could, or was your goal to get to the 100?
The main goal was to get to 100, but I was also just trying to find, you know, where my body shuts down and like when I can as far as I can go.
Right.
And honestly, looking back, I probably could have gone a little farther, but I ran my last lap in like a 38, so that didn't really help.
Right. So then at that point, you decided to time out?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, no, I'm done after this. The transition to trail would have totally killed me.
Right. Right. And then what time in the morning do you transition back? Is it like 6 a.m. or something when it starts to get light?
It's 9.
9.
We start at 9 and then we transition from the 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. loop.
Okay. Nice. And your 100 was in 1855, I think is what I read. Is that correct?
That was my total running time. Yeah, it was like
Okay.
1855.
Okay. Nice. A solid first 100.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank
it's
you.
exciting.
So I think we've already established too that you have a pretty good, like, robust psychology when it comes to, like, feeling the pain, embracing the pain, feeling the nerves, but not letting them like shake your confidence. So when you say that the nighttime came and your mind started to, like go to a dark place, like what was going on? What was leading those kind of negative feelings?
It was really just like fed by the hurt. Like my feet were totally shot, so I was hurting a lot. But I was just kind of like, yeah. I mean, my dad was there, and he was crewing me through the night with my younger sister. My family and my buddy were at the hotel, so it was just my dad, and he was not about to let me quit. So he was kind of just, he'd be like, yeah, I'm like, Dad, my feet are killing me. He's like, yep, yeah, that'll happen. So
No sympathy.
yeah, exactly. I was just trying to get up every single lap and get out there.
Has your dad finished 100?
Yeah, he ran his first 100 at Kettle.
Okay.
And he ran LAS too, and he ran 11 yards. So he had a solid finish.
Nice. And I heard that your siblings, did they also run? Younger siblings?
Yeah, all of them ran. I think he's 9. I don't know. He ran 20 miles, and then
Wow.
one of my 12-year-old younger brother ran 16 miles. And then my 11-year-old sister ran 12 or 13, and then my 8-year-old brother ran 13 as well.
Wow. So did you start all of this like after you started running with your dad? Is that what got them interested, or were they already doing that too?
I think so. Just seeing my dad and I go out there and run like this and have fun with it, I think that definitely drives them to do it.
Right.
And I mean, like all the aid station food, like that's probably a good motivator. Yeah.
And that race is a pretty fun race too, a nice community. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a party out there. I mean, like the entire night there was a DJ.
Yep.
So that was pretty fun, except I tried to take like a 2-minute nap and all I heard was rave music. So that wasn't.
That's great. Does your mom also run?
No, she's the crew chief.
Nice. Got to have one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from the last time that we talked, like your parents, it was you, your parents, and I talking, and just kind of got to know you and know them a little bit more. And your dad and mom just seem like the most wonderful, supportive people in the world. So I think it's awesome that you have such good influences. And what your dad was saying too, he does a lot of reading on like training theory and reads articles and sends them to you. So I think it's awesome that you have that type of you have that type of influence that's guiding you in a good direction, because like from two experienced ultramarathoners and coaches talking with you right now, I mean, I think you're on a dynamite plan for like getting as much out of your ultra legs as you can, and then transitioning back into cross country and track season, and managing both of those or I guess all three of those completely different but related sports really well. So great job to your dad, in teaching himself, but also passing on that information to you and pumping out some dynamite performances himself. So congratulations to all your brothers and sisters who, who came out and kind of caught the bug too. So I think it's awesome that we get like a younger generation involved with this type of community. And I guess my next question is what are the differences in community that you see between an ultra race and a track race? Like they both have their unique vibes,
Yeah, I mean, in track and cross country, I see a lot of brotherhood, like with my teammates. We're just a big family training and stuff, but kind of the same thing with people you meet in the trail community. Like you just create this family out there and you're just all trying to get through it, It's definitely, I feel like they're totally the same. Like the amount of stuff you do together is crazy. Like there's a lot of competition in like track and stuff, and that can kind of get to people's heads. But I just try to think of people that I line up against as people just doing the same stuff I am and trying to get through it. And I just have to like run a bit faster, but make sure I congratulate them, make sure they're doing okay and stuff like that.
Well, I think that's a very mature way to handle it.
Oh, we lost Reese. Sometimes he goes out for a second. Can you still hear me, Marek?
Yeah, I can. Reese definitely just cut out there.
All right, he'll be back probably, but I bet there's a bit of gossip that goes on in track and cross country when you step up to the line, because I'm guessing people are like, oh, he ran 100 miles. So that would be interesting for your season.
Yeah, a couple people. I mean, I kind of get a lot of hate for like the ultra distance stuff. Everybody's like, yeah, you're gonna burn your legs out by the time you're in college. I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I can handle this type of stuff. Like I can see where you're coming from, but like my legs are fine with this.
Right, right. And now we have two Reeses. This is kind of freaky.
Oh,
See if I can get rid of the other one. See if I can remove him. There we go. I won't report it, Reese, but I had the option. So how will you transition from coming off of this recovery time from Ode and then going back into cross country season?
I'm just gonna train like high mileage, just try to keep my base mileage up and keep that going, and then have the speed work from cross in there. But hopefully my coach will be able to kind of do a little better training wise, like mixing up the workouts and stuff and keeping my mileage high.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm just gonna keep rolling with that sort of thing.
Right, right. So, when I was coaching and when my kids were in high school, there was always kind of mileage clubs at our high school where, kids could, do the 200-mile club or 300, and the top was 500-mile club. How many miles will you have for the summer?
That's a really good question. Definitely over 100, but
yeah, I would guess
honestly,
over 500 for the summer for sure.
probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, probably.
Yeah. So you'll be going in with definitely a solid base. Is this your first year of cross country season? I didn't see anything on athletic.net for last year.
This is my second.
Okay, maybe just didn't show in there.
Yeah, last year was kind of a bummer though, because I had like 2 or 3 ultras like in the middle of the season, and all of them were like a week before like regionals and the first meet and stuff like that. So I tapered like 4 times during that season, which was pretty bad.
Right.
But hopefully this season will be a lot better because I'll be focusing in on cross country and not some 50-mile.
Okay, so you're going to prioritize cross country this year and do ultras in the off season?
Yeah, that's kind of my strategy right now, is just make it through high school and college and then focus on ultras after college.
You're on mute, Reese. We put you in the corner.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so yeah, I think that's amazing, putting it into different buckets like that and thinking like, I'm going to really work on my cross country at this point. I'm going to work on my track at this point, because a lot of times what we see is that if you throw too much at an athlete all at once, you don't make gains anymore. Like you can work upper end for a certain amount of time. You can work on your lower end for a certain amount of time. But if you try to add all the volume, all the intensity, if your body's not prepared for it, you might get like 2 or 3 weeks of running and completing the workouts, but your body might not actually be making the change that it needs to be getting better, But by compartmentalizing it like that, you're doing a great service to like your long-term performance, because, like running these different distances is like running different sports. So it kind of gives you something different to chew on. Loretta, I don't know what your experience with athletes is with this, but I feel like when, like all I do is tell my athletes just go and run like high volume, and we don't really throw any type of workout, it's like you can kind of get like mentally a little bit stale of like, man, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So
sure. And I feel like your experience at Ode to Laz really is a good way of representing, when we talk as coaches about, it's important to have that VO2 max and that tempo work even as an ultra runner, because you're definitely nailing those in track and cross country season, right? Where you're really hitting that VO2 max, pushing to your limits, that out of breath 10 on the RPE scale, right? And then you have days that you're more at that tempo pace and you're, working that lactate threshold, but then you've also been really smart. I feel really smart as a younger runner to understand and respect that lower, longer, slow distance where it's really going to benefit you in cross country season, so sometimes people forget all of those pieces can help on both ends, right? As an ultra runner, we need speed and tempo. And as a track and cross country athlete, we need long and slow too, so, having that I think is really, really helpful for you.
Yeah. And like, as a person, like I need to be able to go fast sometimes. So
Right.
just having that integrated is really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious because I just feel like you have a lot of emotional intelligence for your age and being able to handle these hard things. I'm not sure myself at 14 could have finished 100 miles. Is there something that in the way you've been raised that has taught you that? Did you get that from one of your parents? I mean, have they given some good wisdom?
Honestly, I think it's just like seeing my dad just get through stuff that's really, really pushed me. Seeing him go through highs and lows in life and get through them, and also having him running with me, watching him suffer through the exact same stuff I'm going through. It's something that I can relate to, and that's really, really helpful.
That's awesome. I love that.
Perfect. Well, I think this is a great conversation. And Marek, thanks again for joining us today. We took up, about like an hour of your time, and we greatly appreciate it. I think, for everybody that's out there, you've given us a bunch of nuggets on just, emotional resilience, psychological resilience, how to navigate highs and lows, as well as what it's like being young and in high school. And, a lot of us have different responsibilities than you do, but still you're trying to juggle a lot of things at once. So I think the way that you're and the influences in your life are super positive. And I think if there's one thing that we can all take from this conversation, it's that, support people around you so that way you can get that support in return and grow and evolve and know that running these races and pulling out times and doing certain distances is about the experience more so than the result itself. So I guess, is there anything else that you want to add or you want the listeners to hear about you, how you train, your friends, your lifestyle?
No, not really. Kind of just, yeah, high school is pretty cool. Running fast is cool too. So, yes,
Another
gotta
take.
go fast.
Fast is cool. I like it.
So I do have a question. You have cross country season coming up. Do you have any big goals for cross country season?
Definitely sub 16. I'm at 16:21 right now, and school record is 16:05.
Nice.
So going for that.
Nice. I think you have a great opportunity. And how about what's up next for Ultra?
That's a good question. I've kind of been thinking, and I've been going pretty aggressive at this for the past. Oh, someone's at the door.
Someone's at the front door doorbell.
But I've been going pretty aggressive for the past and kind of recuperate, work on some shorter distance stuff, and yeah, kind of go through cross and track again.
Okay. I'm going to just throw an idea out there. Okay. Because I'm a bad influence. So I tend to love fast and flat, and I have kind of gotten addicted to 24 hours on the track. Would you ever consider doing on the track? Because they're pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely listened to your stuff on 6 days in the Dome, and That sounds absolutely horrible, and I kind of want to.
Yeah, do it. Yeah. My other experience was at Desert Solstice, which is an elite track invitational. Very awesome race too. I have a podcast there you can listen to, and it kind of tells the story. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity coming up for you in the ultra world.
Yeah, definitely.
Eric, thank you so much for being here. Loretta, thank you so much for all the great questions and insights that you provide too. Yeah, I've been waiting for this one for a while, so I'm glad that that race went well and you got your goal, you got your 100 miles for the year, and cheers to you in the future with everything that you got going on, and with school coming up and with ultra racing coming up. So it's going to be interesting to follow the trajectory of your running and your racing. So yeah, let's keep in touch, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet.